All right, Fat Boys, odd to start with an apology first, but I know I said I'd have all the recordings done before I flew. I know I said I'd have the video out to you before the Thursday game in Week 6. Obviously 0 for 2 on that one. You can't really blame me. There were some cool people to hang out with in Kenya, and I took advantage. I am back in Switzerland now, so we should have a better schedule, all that stuff. And trust me, given what happened in fantasy, I would love to forget Week 5 even happened and just skip this video, but I feel like I need to at least pay attention to it because the league had some cool things happen, but our league definitely, it was a big week. So let's get right down to it. Week 5 NFL recaps can exist in that world right between NFL and fantasy to keep our interest. First thing, though, I have to kind of talk about 34-0. I know there's some past fans out there, and I don't think in my lifetime I've seen this, well, since probably about the 90s. One of the worst losses in the Belichick reign, which does get people start talking about changes and whether or not he wants to be there for much longer. You can go on a lot of articles that talk about how he's chasing potentially the all-time coaching lead. I don't know if that's true. If it is, someone like Andy Reid is 30 behind him, but has Mahomes and a couple extra years. So if he wants that, where he maybe New England is not the place for him. But right now, one of the worst parts I think they have on the go, especially if you've taken New England, they actually do have a talented defense. Unfortunately, they're hurt, and there's not much more they can do about that. Also, his coaching staff, he's hired a bunch of his kids, which I know Nepo babies is a bit of a thing, and if you are one, then maybe you're going to defend it a bit more. I don't mind if there's a Nepo baby in our entertainment industry, if they're the heads of state or politics, or if they're 2/3 of our Ivy League undergrad class. But to have them in your NFL coaching staff seems a bit extreme. I think that's a bit too important. We got to draw the line somewhere. But that brings me to my second topic. We have the haves. We do have a group of that healthy middle class, but we certainly are now seeing a lot of the tanking teams. New England may just be one of them. Now, tanking is a strong word. I don't want to throw that out. We don't know yet that some of those teams are trying to buff it, but New England with 1 win. We know Carolina now is our only team left with 0 wins. They will not be tanking because if you remember, they actually don't own their own draft pick, so there's no advantage to them finishing dead last, whereas some of these teams there will be. The Bears actually have their pick, but the Bears are another one of those teams that now just got their first win and have looked great in the last 2 weeks, which I'm sure all the Bears fans would love to shove in my face after me being quite unkind to them in the first couple weeks. But, I mean, if you are the Bears, like your mother always told you, having 2 top 5 picks in an NFL draft that's meant to be loaded with talent is always better than 1. I would put Minnesota on that list, Arizona on that list, Denver on that list, the Giants now with a few injuries, which we'll get to in a second. All these teams might be competing not just for who's the best, but who can get that pick. Remember, for those who don't know or don't follow the college game, USC's Caleb Williams is touted to be probably the number 1 pick, at least as it stands right now, barring some massive injury where he breaks all his femurs or something. But this is also supposed to be one of the more talented quarterback classes in the recent years. So don't be shocked, fantasy owners, if all of a sudden some of your teams start making some odd decisions. Might give us a chance to take some rookies or some people that are underused in some of those offenses because some trades might be happening if you've been paying attention. And we have the Tankapalooza game with the Vikings and the Bears going at it this weekend. Both teams have a vested interest in both winning and in losing. Some trade talk already for people like Kirk Cousins and getting him out. So keep your eye on it because I do think this is why it's an NFL-based thing, but it is going to have a massive impact on our fantasy teams. Not all the teams are obviously tanking. We do have 2 undefeated teams still, the Eagles and the 49ers. And in fact, the league is really kind of starting to separate. Those halves are certainly a little more than you might think. Now, not everyone goes super nerdy with their stats. There's one that tries to amalgamate stats together. It's called DVOA. It's commonly used by a lot of people who liked their math in with their football, defensive adjusted value over average. It kind of gives you a holistic rank of both the offense and the defense. The top 4 in offense are actually the top 4 in defense, just in a different order. Probably the top tier, though, we got San Francisco, number 1 ranked in defense, number 2 in offense. You don't get a whole lot better than that. There's really only one way they can improve. But the Bills, the Dolphins, and the Lions all are top 4 in both offense and defense. A team like the Eagles, also undefeated, they're 5th and 7th respectively. Then you get teams like the Chiefs that are 6th in both, the Seahawks that are 7th in both. So there's certainly some teams that are on just the outskirt. But those top 4, that's actually pretty impressive. You don't see that very often. So leading us into a game like or a week like this, it does give us no real direct matchups between those two. We've had a couple in the last couple weeks. I mean, the Bills and the Dolphins played a couple weeks ago. We had the 49ers and the Cowboys, but neither of those were monster games. So this really does lead us to believe that this week, if you don't really have any of those epic matchups, we have a couple middle ground, like 3-2 and 2-3 teams going at it. We definitely have some high and some low going off against each other. So one thing to bear in mind, NFL is almost never going chalk. There's always going to be a couple upsets. So again, for fantasy owners who might be looking to cover maybe some injuries, which I'll talk about in a second, or some bye weeks if you have some Packers and Steelers, maybe taking a flyer on one of those teams that isn't supposed to do well, and maybe you can put up an upset. If you can predict it right, you can get paid off huge. Last thing to talk about then is unfortunately the injuries. A monster week in injury. Every week seems to be a monster week in injuries, but this one we had top tier guys like quarterbacks. They don't always go out, but Richardson again, second time out. This one sounds like he's going to be out for a couple more weeks. Daniel Jones and his neck. I heard there's some things in your neck you got to take care of, so that's no good. Watson may or may not be injury. Apparently his shoulder injury might have something to do with it, but he's missing his second week in a row, and rumor has it, it might not just be the injury. There might be something else afoot. But realistically, I think the big injury, Jefferson, in a lot of leagues, he went number one. If he didn't go number one, he probably went second. This is a pretty big one. Now it's hamstring, which can be iffy. Again, you need those to run and to push, and because the Vikings are someone that are thinking about maybe not making a run for the postseason, since considering their start, who knows when he's going to be back. So I know fantasy owners are going to have to figure that one out. HN, I mean, sorry, I know those who took him, pick him up off the waiver wire. You probably spent a lot to do so. He looks like he's out for a couple weeks. High ankle sprain are three of the worst words you can hear in that order. If you're a fantasy owner, those can be things that last quite a bit. Then you got other running backs. You got Connor out, Herbert out, possibly Johnson, Herbert's replacement, also out. So there should be a lot of movement on the waiver wires, and most of it by now has already been done. Gibbs, sorry, is also out. Olave, I know, is a question mark. St. Brown missed last week. Of course, now that means we're getting into projection territory, which is more about week 6, which I would love to focus on because the first 5 weeks haven't exactly been awesome for everybody. But before we do so, we do need to look at week 5. How did we get to where we are now fantasy-wise, and what does that mean? Which means it's time for the matchups. Every week I start off with the top scoring team as the first game that we look into, but I believe this is the first week that I'm looking at the number 1 and the number 2 leading teams of the week. I am so sorry, Waylon. That sucks for you. Literally, you both would have beat anybody else this week, but unfortunately, you bumped against each other. That's a tough L to take. Let's see how it happened. I mean, we're not going to be picking too many negatives here, obviously. I think, Will, congrats on the W. You got Laporta, who is our tight end 3 and has been a massive pickup. Chase is obviously the story for you. This is another great week for him. He was our wide receiver 2. Jacobs was a running back 6, so not in our top 5, but doing quite well. But if you look, I mean, realistically, you just got a couple people that underperformed. Well, even Zay overperformed for that, but everybody else was in the double digits, putting on a decent performance. You look at your bench, it's not like you left a whole lot here. I mean, even Pitts would have been a downgrade, so well done. You just muscled one out, almost 150. That's going to win most weeks. 140 is going to win most weeks, and I mean, you got to look at Etienne, who was our running back 2, but our best running back that was started. That's going to be a theme. We actually had a couple number 1s in their positions, not in, including a defense. I mean, most of the defenses that were taken, 3 of the top 5, no bueno, and all the 5 kickers, no one took. Just one of those weeks. But Pickens as well was our wide receiver 4 in the week. Pacheco's overperformed for you. I mean, if you had to look at anything, Cook is probably the one that you're most disappointed with. You didn't really have anyone to replace him with, though, on the bench, unless you made some moves, and Eckler being on the bye and coming back from injury obviously is still hurting you. Adams was a great call to leave on your bench. It's just unfortunate the way things are going down for you, but at least you got some high-scoring people. Tua's looking great, as always. Pickens, like I said, Ridley overperforming in the UK, although Jacksonville's coming back to Florida as opposed to the UK, so we'll see how he adjusts there. Score 140 again next week, and you probably win, although I hope you don't because I think we're playing each other. But unlucky, Waylon. I hope you didn't break any TVs by throwing crap at it. V, congratulations, buddy. That's a monster win, number 1 in the week. And we go from number 1 in the week to number 1 overall. We have one undefeated team left. We'll get to the other person in a second. But Justin, now you're standing alone on the mountaintop. You had him by point differential anyway, but now you got him by a game. So congratulations there. Mark, you got to be a little upset. We'll get to some people you've left on the bench 2 weeks in a row now that maybe you want to investigate. But actually, I think you guys made a team deal about how many points you can leave on the bench because it looked like it was a bit of a competition. We'll go with the winner here first, Justin. Okay, your killer combo in Buffalo seems to be kicking it, although Gabe Dave got a little bit of love here too. So Mark did hedge that bet just a little bit. Allen was our quarterback 2. We'll get to our quarterback 1 in just a minute. Diggs was just out of the top 5. He was our wide receiver 6. But Kittle was our tight end 1. So only 3 catches, but they all mattered. And obviously Hopkins scoring. Denver, that looks like a good pickup. I think that's going to pay off for you quite well. Looking at your bench, you had our running back 1. Moss was on the bench. That could have changed the tide. Now, I don't blame you, although maybe Matt Breida. Come on, man. But I get it. You were scared of what might get taken away from him now that Taylor's back and Jones was obviously hurt. Barkley's obviously hurt. So running back depth, not your issue. Mark, second week in a row, pal. Fields went off. He was our quarterback 1. Monty went off. He was our running back 5. They probably could have helped you out. Pollard, I get it. I have him in 2 in another league, but he's just been all kinds of disappointing so far this year. I think he'll bounce back, but definitely a candidate for bust of the year so far, considering he was a first or second round pick for a lot of people. Interesting here, too. We had the battle of the big Ds and who was swinging. Now, Justin, you lost that particular fight, but you didn't lose the war. San Francisco definitely showed that they were probably right now, they got to be on everyone's top 1 list, considering who they have and what they've done thus far and the fact that they're still undefeated. Handling Dallas just readily and on a defense that no one else seems to be able to touch. They crushed it. But you didn't do a whole lot wrong. 115 was good enough to beat a lot of people here. But like I said, I think some of the points on your bench might have helped shift it just a little bit. I didn't do the math, but I think you could have been quite close unless Moss would have got involved. But they didn't. Mark, you took another hit here. You're dropping, and now you got to try and assess, do you actually lean in to the dark side and starting the Bears, or at least the one that seems to be scoring points? I would say this week might be an option, just considering who they're playing and how much that team may or may not want to win anymore. But focusing on the positive, we got 1 undefeated left. Justin, it's you. Carry on, buddy. I'd like to say it's karma, because actually we're going to get to this later, and I know I haven't pushed for payment. But let's just say, aside from me, Underhill's the only other person to do it, so is that why he's undefeated? Yes. Yes, that's why. Flip the script. We go from 5-0 to 0-5. Chaz, I'm so sorry, pal. I was rooting for you. Not like I'm rooting against Horace. It's just, I want everyone with the win or 1 in the win column, and I was happy with mine last week. I thought Horst would be a gentleman and allowed to do it again, but he says no, he can't go out of the top 4, so he shut the door. Now, you did exceed your predicted, Chaz, because Burrow finally dug up, which was wonderful. Brown, obviously, has been great for you this year. And then Kupp coming off the IR, that's a monster. Even though people were worried about who gets the love in that relationship, but Kupp is still going to get his 118 out of the gate, so you got to love that. Waddle as well. Everything was set up for a big week for you. But Gus the Bus outscored both of your running backs combined, and now one of them's hurt. And if you even look, you're just dealing with, Gibbs going down, Jones going down. Hopefully you're in triage and you're taking a look at this to assess for week 6, because again, you're not playing me next week, so I'm cheering for you. I want you to get that win. I'd like me to do it too, just so I stay ahead of you, but that's another picky note. Horst, how'd you do this, pal? Let's be honest. This is a win the battle, but let's be worried about the war week. Hall was a monster start. He was our running back 3. Goddard was our our tight end 2. Cincinnati was our defense 2, and a massive pickup. Well done, buddy. And Hurts was our quarterback 3. So when you had players, when they went off, they definitely went off. Now, unfortunately, your Philly connection didn't really work out for you in this one. Well, the Goddard one did, but not the Smith one. But the big news for you is Jefferson's injury. They say hamstring. They say 4 weeks minimum. Let's see how that rolls. For your bench, you had some bye weeks, but it's all going to be from here on out. How can you replace Jefferson, or what can you do to try and get those points back? So best of luck on that one. I don't wish anyone to get hurt, especially not one of our most fun wide receivers to watch. So let's see how that unfolds. But again, we'll worry about the war later. You definitely won the battle this week. You're 3-2. top 4 in the league. So congrats, pal. We can say battle of the Bs, but that sounds corny. I'd like to say battle of one of the undefeateds and an upstart. B was on a bit of a roll, and certainly he kept the momentum going and gave Ben his first loss of the year. Ben, don't worry too much. All right, the bleeding isn't too bad. You're still second in the league, but obviously next week's matchup would have been a little bit more interesting. But we'll get to that when we get to that. Let's talk about B first. Now, right off the get-go, there's the pro and con about having people on Thursday nights. The pro is when it's DJ Moore and he mixes up a monster game, wide receiver 1 for the week. And so right away, Ben knew he was in for trouble. Now, Richardson's injury again. We're not cheering for injuries in this. That's morbid. I don't think Ben was too upset about it, but I don't think he's that kind of a guy where no one wants to see Richardson on the bench. So he looks like he's out for 4 weeks. That's going to be something B's going to have to deal with. And if you look at your bench, pal, you did leave some points on there, but none of them were for a quarterback. So my guess is you maybe have already addressed this issue. Thielen, actually, though, surprising for you, great pickup. He was a top 5 this year. He was our wide receiver 5. But Paka Nacua did great. Okay, CeeDee Lamb maybe, but would you have really started him over him? You know, when it came down to it, your bigs went big enough to make up for your injury, and you held strong. 124, well over predicted. Ben, under. I mean, Mahomes has been great and everything, but just he's not, I think they're just nonchalant on this one. But the big one, Henry with the bagel, that kind of hurts you. HN, that's got to be another one. So I told you this week in the intro that injuries were obviously going to be a concern. Now, on the plus side for you, that might give your guy here some love. Mozart he has less competition in the backfield, so that's looking all right. I don't know here who you'd want to put in after Judy got de-pantsed on TV on Thursday night by Smith. Is he going to come back in the future? Let's see. Jets, monster pickup, great defense, scored a touchdown against Denver. So was that just playing against Denver, or is that the Jets defense we were supposed to see all year? And I mean, realistically, you weathered a storm kind of in terms of McCaffrey. If that's what his bye week or his down weeks looks like without getting injured, knock on wood, I mean, he still scored a touchdown. You're going to be a tough one in every week he got. So, you're getting ready for a big matchup next week, but unfortunately you couldn't keep the momentum going. You dropped your first one of the year, but you're still top 2. And B, you're on a roll, buddy. 5th in the league, 3-2. Good luck next week. There's the only bad thing about doing these recaps is when you have a stinker, now I got to talk about it. In a week where the 1 and 2 play each other, I guess it's fitting that the 9 and 10 play each other. I'm going to need a sip of courage. I swear it's we'll say coffee. All right. Well, congrats, Jake. I mean, let's put it on the table. You're 3rd in the league, 4-1. Well done there, sir. How do you score 85 and still beat someone by 7 points? Well, let's see. Hill pretty much beat me. That is all. I mean, you've got a Connor injury now to deal with, and the fact that Najee Harris doesn't know what he's doing. But you do have Taylor coming back. That he's supposed to be getting more and more love each week. Jackson just had an off week. Yeah. And you had Myers. Oh, you left Jake Ferguson on the bench. Damn you. That was literally the only reason I wanted to lose to you. I don't have to talk about my team, do I? Can I just... Kamara is great. Kelsey was great. How about this? I'll turn this into a positive. Here's life advice for everybody here. If you're going to take a defense, and that particular game, the score is 34-0, try to take the defense that wins. Yeah, should have thought about that. New Orleans defense was the number 1 defense, not surprisingly, and no one took them. Could have had him. Would have beat Jake. Could have put in Trevor Lawrence, because I got no love here. Would have beat Jake. Fantasy football, why do you hate me so? Well, I mean, the cat's out of the bag. I did not record this in Kenya because turns out Kenya has some really cool people I wanted to hang out with, and I'd rather do that than just record. So I'm a little bit late on this one, and I cannot hit this button fast enough to get that week out of here. So on to week 6, but like you can see on the scores here, yes, I am recording this after Thursday night's game for the 2nd week in a row. Not going to do it again, though. I'm back in Geneva, so I will keep my momentum going, and I will make sure this gets out to you before next week's Thursday night game. Looking like so we do have some decent matchups here. 6 6 versus 7, 4 versus 5. We've got Jake, who's agreed that he would just not score over 90 anymore. So Chaz, you know where your bar is. I'm up against Waylon, who, I mean, you got to go off this week, Waylon, because you could not have had any more bad luck last week. So I'm probably in tough. But realistically, the one we're looking at, we got our 1 versus 2. Now, Ben didn't quite get out of the gate with the Kansas City-Denver game as he thought he would, but it wasn't exactly a pure stinker. So I think he'll be okay. Justin, no one's taken you down yet, and I'm sure you don't intend anyone to. Now, granted, Ben would have to win by a lot to overtake him overall, but who knows? Crazier things have happened. Sometimes you win weeks when people don't even score 80. So let's see what goes on there. But as per usual here, we do have an undefeated. We do have a winless. Everyone else is getting jumbled in between. So please note, every game obviously is going to matter. Pay attention to your starters. Pay attention to your bye weeks. Pay attention to your last-minute injuries. I have a feeling plus minus may once again help define our league as we tend to be quite tight in the middle here. Anywho, like I said, this should be back to normal schedule for next week. Do pay attention on Sunday. We got another UK game. I think this is the last one for a bit. I think there's a Germany game coming up a bit, but I haven't really looked what week that is. But for Sunday people, there's that one game that starts a bit earlier. Other than that, it's business as usual, but we're getting down to the nitty-gritty. This is where you want to earn your wins. So best of luck, everybody. See you in week 6.